My name is Gabriella. I grew up in a small lakeside town in Minnesota, where winters dragged on forever and everyone knew each other. As a kid, I thought I had a normal family. My dad was a high school physics teacher, and my mom worked night shifts as a nurse at the county hospital. We weren't rich, but we weren't struggling either. I used to be the only child, and for a brief time, I thought I was loved the way every child deserves to be. Mom used to brush my hair before heading to work, and Dad would take me fishing every weekend. On summer evenings, the three of us would sit on the porch, eating ice cream and listening to cicadas in the calm night air. I believed that was what a warm family was built on. But it all ended on a freezing January night, right after I turned 8. I was woken up in the middle of the night by urgent knocking and headlights flashing in the driveway. My aunt, Evelyn, stepped into the house with a pale face, telling me to grab a coat and a few things. Mom was at the hospital, she said. My baby sister had been born 2 months early and needed special care. I was too young to understand what was really happening, but I knew one thing: nothing was ever the same after that night. They named her Lily, a tiny red little life form surrounded by tubes and machines, lying silently inside an incubator. I wasn't allowed near her. "We can't risk her getting sick," Mom said flatly, eyes glued to the heart monitor. When I reached out to touch her hand, she brushed me away gently, like I too was a threat. From the moment Lily came home, everything revolved around her. Our house became a sterile zone. Sanitizer in every room, air purifiers running around the clock. And the bleach smell was so strong, I'd wake up in the middle of the night with a burning throat. Anytime I coughed or even sneezed, Mom would pack me up and send me to Grandma's. At first, I thought it was a treat. Grandma made amazing apple pie and always saved me a new book. But little by little, I understood. I wasn't welcome in my own home. I was seen as a potential risk to Lily, the precious one all their hopes were pinned on. I got a perfect score on my first third-grade math test. I brought it home, hoping Mom would stick it on the fridge like she used to. She glanced at the paper, then turned to ask Dad if he remembered to buy tissues because Lily seemed a little stuffy. And Dad? He just nodded and said, "Good job," without a hug, without even a real smile. It was just done. I tried everything to win back their attention. I drew pictures, won first place in the school science fair, told Mom about all the fascinating things I read in books. But every effort was dismissed with the same excuse. Lily has a mild fever. Lily's sleeping. Lily needs rest. Gabriella, please be quiet. I gradually learned how to stay invisible. I kept to myself in my room, which always smelled like peppermint oil, the one scent that bothered Lily, so she wasn't allowed in. It was the only space that felt like mine, where I started diving into art history, antiques, and the imagined worlds behind every old painting. But what hurt more than being ignored was when they began rewriting the past. "Gabriella's always been strong and independent," Mom told the neighbors when I got into the gifted program. "She understands that Lily needs extra care." No, I didn't understand. I only knew I once had a family, and then one day, it vanished, without warning. I slowly realized expectations were never meant for me. Praise, hugs, even just a proud glance from my parents, all of it was for Lily. I didn't need that stuff, they thought. "Gabriella's the type who takes care of herself," Mom would say when someone asked about me. But being independent doesn't mean not needing love. In 8th grade, I applied for a job at a bakery in town called Sugar Pines. The owner, Mrs. Lorraine, was the first person outside my family who saw value in me. She never asked why a 13-year-old wanted to mop floors and sell pastries after school. She just put a hand on my shoulder and said, "If you work hard, you deserve a place in the world." I've never forgotten that. Every day after school, I'd head to the bakery, tie up my hair, and start wiping tables, washing trays, and taking orders. At home, I'd quietly do homework at my tiny desk in the corner of my room. No one ever asked where I'd been, when I got back, or what I was doing, so long as I didn't startle Lily with the smell of hand soap. Lily was different. She never had to work. never had to clean up her textbooks, and certainly never set foot in a bakery unless it was to buy her birthday cake. Every time Lily had an event, from group presentations to church performances, the whole family would show up with flowers and a video camera. Me? Even when I got a perfect score on the SAT, Mom just muttered, "That's good," while slicing fruit for Lily because she's low on vitamin C. During senior year, I applied to 12 colleges. I didn't tell anyone. I quietly wrote essays during my breaks at the bakery and had Mrs. Lorraine proofread them. She even taught me how to write from the heart, she called it. I got my own recommendation letters, filled out my financial aid forms, and figured out FAFSA on my own. Every step I took was silent and solo, but never hesitant. I didn't expect my parents to pay for college, so I applied for every scholarship I could find. Merit-based, need-based, first generation, every line of every application was my quiet rebellion against being overlooked. I worked all summer, saved every tip, and even stuffed coins into a piggy bank to afford a bus ticket to a scholarship interview in the next state. Then, one spring afternoon, while wiping down the bakery counter like always, I got an email. I'd been accepted to Northwestern University with a full-ride scholarship. I stood frozen in the buttery, sweet scent of cookies, eyes stinging, smiling uncontrollably. Mrs. Lorraine hugged me like I was her own granddaughter. It was the first time I cried because someone was truly proud of me. That night, I brought the acceptance letter home and showed it to Mom. She glanced at it and set it on the table. "Congrats. But don't tell Lily. She's stressed out lately." I nodded, folded the paper, slipped it into my pocket, and headed upstairs, while Lily laughed downstairs about her new ballet shoes from that boutique I'd never even dared step into. Weeks later, the whole family threw a little party because Lily won second place in a school art contest. Dad even hung her drawing in the living room with a plaque that read, "The family's talent." I looked at the picture, a pink cat standing on a rainbow. Then back at my essay, praised as exceptional beyond expectation by a college professor, now tucked away in my desk drawer. That's when I knew. No matter how hard I tried, I'd always be the child who didn't cause trouble, and Lily, no matter how ordinary, would always be the special one. But this time, I had the key to leave, and I swore I'd become someone they could never ignore again. I chose to major in art history at Northwestern partly out of passion, partly because I was done letting anyone else make choices for me. Those lectures on Art Deco, European dynasties, and the symbolism of antique jewelry brought me back to memories with Grandma, who used to let me sort through boxes of old brooches, necklaces, and earrings whenever I was sent to her house. I still remember a hairpin shaped like a swan with pale lavender stones. Back then, I didn't know if it was valuable, just that the way the light hit the gem left me breathless. I spent hours by the window staring at it like it was treasure. Now I know. The gaze we give an antique isn't just fascination. It's instinct. A kind of intuition only I could trust. Graduating with honors, I landed an unpaid internship at a small jewelry appraisal firm in Chicago, mostly working with local auction houses. While my friends rushed into big media or finance firms, I quietly pulled on white gloves, bent over a magnifying glass, and photographed every tiny scratch on rings no one else cared about. At the time, I didn't know those nameless pieces would change my life. The first big shift came from a brooch listed as costume jewelry, the kind worth maybe a few $dozen. I didn't know why, but the moment I picked it up, something stirred in me. The design was simple, yet the detailing was exquisite. The edges were finely engraved, the enamel flawless, and on the back was a tiny mark, almost worn away. I spent the whole evening researching that mark. Turns out, it belonged to a French artisan who used to make jewelry for the nobility in the early 20th century, before his workshop was destroyed during the war. The brooch wasn't just authentic, it was incredibly rare. I presented my findings in a small meeting with my supervisors. I didn't speak out of pride, but with every bit of passion I had. I backed it up with archival documents, design comparisons, and even asked a friend from the university library to help me access a museum database to pull original records. The result? The brooch was reappraised with a starting value of $12,000, and when it went up for auction at the antique showcase in Seattle, it sold for over $40,000. That was the first time my name appeared in the company email, with a short line of praise, "Gabriella has a sharp eye." I kept working as if nothing had happened, but more and more pieces that had been misjudged started accidentally landing in my hands. One time it was a cloisonné enamel necklace, written off as a reproduction, but it turned out to be an original by a 19th century Russian artist. Another time, a platinum wedding ring mistaken for a generic bridal piece. It was actually a limited design, one of only 30 made for a historic Boston family's anniversary. I began being trusted with larger collections. My supervisor, Margaret, invited me to lunch for the first time. While slicing a tart, she said, "Gabriella, have you ever thought about going solo?" I laughed, thinking she was joking. Me? The girl who's worked unpaid for 2 years and survives on instant noodles? She tilted her head, eyes sharp. Exactly. The hungriest people find the rarest meals. Her words stuck with me. I started taking on small verification jobs, pawn shops, family-owned antique stores, places that couldn't afford big firms. I charged less, but left no detail unchecked. Careful, patient, never skipping a single step. One night, I returned to my rundown apartment on the 4th floor, opened the closet and stared at the notebook my grandmother had left me. On the first page, in messy handwriting, it read, "It's not the rare item. It's the girl who sees it as treasure." I understood. If I had once been invisible in my own home, now, every piece I touched was how I redefined myself. And I swore I would never let anyone misjudge me again, just as I'd never misjudge the true value of a hidden gem buried beneath time's dust. I started my own business in the fall of my 27th year. No one knew, not that anyone asked. My family still thought I was working some temporary job somewhere, as if my whole career was just a pause between Lily's constant major changes. I rented a tiny office on the 3rd floor of an old building in Milwaukee, just above an Italian cafe and next to a closed-down dental clinic. The office was barely 300 square feet, with a wobbly wooden desk propped up by a file box, a chair I salvaged from the trash and cleaned thoroughly, and a second-hand lamp from a flea market. Every time I switched it on, the bulb made a faint click, like even it wasn't sure about my dream. I named the company Aurum and Iris. Aurum for gold, Iris after the flower my mom used to grow in our yard before Lily was born and everything withered in silence. The beginning was tough. I worked with small-time clients, an elderly woman wanting to verify her engagement ring from the Great Depression, a local antique dealer needing to tell real platinum from a plated mix. I charged less than the big firms, but my work was meticulous, right down to gemstone microscopy and historical provenance tracking. My reputation began to grow. One referral turned into 2. Then came calls from estate lawyers, private collectors, even a small regional museum needing help appraising an inherited jewelry set that had never been professionally examined. In my 2nd year, I moved to a larger office. This time, it was on the ground floor, glass-fronted with a proper sign, still not far from the Italian cafe. I hired my first employee, Maya, a recent geology graduate with bright eyes and an uncanny patience for tiny stones. I taught her how to examine gemstone cuts under filament bulbs, how to spot signs of handcrafting with the naked eye, and most importantly, how to trust intuition. Things grew faster than I expected. By year 5, I had 3 operating offices in Milwaukee, Minneapolis, and Denver. We served clients from both coasts, handled authentication contracts for million-dollar auctions, and specialized in forgotten collections found in storage rooms, safes, and attics. My net worth at the time was over $12 million, not including nearly $1 million more in pending authentication contracts. I still lived in a small house in the suburbs, drove a neutral-toned silver SUV, and used an older model phone, not because I was frugal, but because I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. My family still had no idea. To them, I was just Gabriella, the stubborn daughter who refused to get a stable office job, made a living handling old stuff, and always missed dinner because I was probably busy dusting antiques again. I still went to Sunday dinners, still listened to Mom talk about how Lily had just changed her major for the 4th time, this time to animal behavior psychology, and how she might have finally found her passion. Still heard Dad suggest I apply for a job at the local high school because they have good insurance. Still watch Lily scroll through Instagram mid-conversation, showing off a new designer bag she claimed was from a sale, though one glance told me it was a limited edition piece, never discounted anywhere. Whenever they asked what I was doing, I just gave a soft smile. Same old. A little authentication work, a few vintage pieces. No one asked for details. No one noticed that the pearl necklace I wore once belonged to a British noblewoman from the Edwardian era, or that the ruby hairpin was a rare early 20th century design. They assumed it was flea market stuff. I didn't bother correcting them. Once, Lily joked during dinner. Gab probably has enough necklaces to open a shop. I smiled, poured myself some orange juice, and said, "Who knows, right?" I could have said it all. That I was behind some of the biggest authentication cases in the region, that my company had just signed a contract with the National Museum, that I was invited to write for a top gemology journal, that the bracelet Lily was wearing was a fake. But I didn't. Because sometimes, silence is the only crown the overlooked get to wear, without asking for permission. I began sending money to my parents at the end of my 5th year in business. It started at $3,000 a month, then rose to 5, then 7. When Lily's sudden academic expenses increased after switching to her 5th major, this time in interior design. Coincidentally, the very field I once dreamed of but couldn't pursue because the family couldn't afford it. Mom called me one weekend evening, her voice lowering after a few polite thank yous. "Lily's really finding herself, you know? But tuition at Parsons isn't cheap, and your father, a teacher's salary can't cover it all." I was at my desk, reviewing documents for a $400,000 antique jewelry appraisal, nodding like I was thinking about a discounted loaf of bread. "Can you help a little?" she asked, after a brief pause. I asked in return, "How much do you need per month?" $7,000. But just for a while. Once Lily graduates, she'll help out the whole family. I didn't mention that Lily hadn't finished any program in the past 6 years. I didn't ask why they hadn't suggested she apply for scholarships or part-time jobs. Instead, I opened my business account and set up an automatic monthly transfer of $7,000 under the label Family Support, Tuition Assistance. Every time the money went out, I reminded myself, not because they deserve it, but because I can do it. Not everyone can. Jessica Felix. I kept pretending not to hear Mom telling the neighbors, "Gabriella lives so frugally she basically eats canned soup and rides the bus." Pretending not to see Lily posting vacation pics from Cabo with designer bags, captioned, "I deserve this after a tough semester." Once, during Sunday dinner, I had just finished cutting a slice of roast when Lily looked at me with a half smirk. "Ever thought about doing an MBA, Gab? Might help with your little antique shop job?" Mom didn't laugh. She nodded thoughtfully. "She's right. Everyone has a master's degree now. If you went back to school, you might find a better job." I stayed quiet and took a sip of water. The glass was slightly fogged, and in my mind was the design for the new gallery in New York, one I had just signed the contract for last week. A $2,500,000 0 cents project, and I was in charge of authenticating every single piece of jewelry. But they didn't need to know. They never wanted to. Lily still believed I lived off our parents' savings. Once, at her boyfriend's birthday party, after a few drinks, she let it slip to her friends. My sister? No idea why she's still chasing all that dusty old stuff. My parents still help her pay rent out of pity. One of her friends, who happened to be a former client of mine, later told me exactly what she said. I remember laughing when I heard it, not out of sadness, not out of anger, just empty. The kind of emptiness that comes from standing at the top and looking down, only to see your family still at the base of the mountain, unwilling to climb, but demanding you drop them a rope. I stayed silent, just like those antique pieces I once found buried in piles of junk. Sometimes, silence is what makes something truly rare. But things started to shift when Lily bought a new car, a limited edition BMW sports model. She posted it on Instagram with the caption, "Rewarding myself after a tough semester. Hard work always pays off." That car, I knew, cost over $90,000, 0 cents. And I also knew no student at Parsons could afford it without quiet funding. That day, Mom called me, voice full of pride. "Did you see, honey? Lily's doing so well. She's handling everything on her own now. She's really got the potential to be successful." I stayed quiet again, but this time there was no patience left in me. Just one clear question echoing in my mind. When will they finally see me? Not the faded shadow they made up. I hadn't planned to host Thanksgiving that year. Honestly, I was planning to disappear somewhere, alone. But then Mom called, sounding more fragile than usual. "I haven't been feeling well, Gabriella. No one's really up to cooking this year. Everyone's looking forward to the holiday, you know how it is." I knew. Looking forward to a dinner no one remembers cooking, but everyone would remember if I didn't show up. I paused for a few seconds before replying. "I'll take care of it, you get some rest." In truth, I had already contacted a high-end catering service from Chicago, the same one I used for my company's auction events. They specialized in private dinners for collectors, offering custom-designed menus where every dish was a work of art, from plating to seasoning. I paid for everything with my company's secondary card. No one knew, no one asked. Everyone just assumed I knew a few chefs. On Thanksgiving morning, I arrived early. The catering team followed an hour later with portable ovens, silver trays, and even a professional tablescape designer. Lily caught a glimpse of them and whispered to Mom, "Isn't she going a little overboard? Looks like she's trying to impress someone." I gave a small smile. Impress? I had no one left to impress. I just wanted one real meal. No dry turkey, no mushy potatoes, no gravy so salty you had to gulp water between bites. Dinner was served right on time. Nearly 20 people filled the house. Grandparents, aunts, uncles, distant relatives, and of course, Lily and her new boyfriend, all gasping over every dish. I didn't say much, just smiled and poured wine. Mid-meal, I quietly went upstairs to my old room to monitor a live auction happening in Tokyo. A longtime client of mine was bidding on a rare Meiji-era gemstone set. I couldn't afford to be distracted. I opened my laptop, launched the authentication software, and tracked the bids while staying connected with my assistant via Bluetooth headset. Then, Lily barged in without knocking. "Do you have an iPhone charger? My phone's dying," she asked, without waiting for a reply, eyes already locked on the glowing laptop screen, where graphs and figures lit up clearly. Her eyes widened, then narrowed. She gave a slight smirk. "Mind if I borrow this? Let's show everyone just how cool your little antique work is." Before I could stand up, she picked up the laptop and walked straight to the dining room. "Guys, look what Gabriella's doing on Thanksgiving," she called out as I rushed after her. "Hi!" She spun the screen around for all to see. No one said a word. Open tabs revealed a bank account with a $12,600,000 0 cents balance, a pending $400,000 0 cents authentication contract, and the latest internal quarterly report, clearly stating company earnings of over $4 million, 0 cents. Silence. The kind of silence where you can hear a fork graze the edge of a plate. Mom broke it first. She gave a small laugh, forced down a bite of turkey, then shook her head. "Come on now. Gabriella's probably just helping someone. With paperwork, right, sweetheart?" I took a deep breath, straightened my sleeves, and stepped into the middle of the room. "No, Mom. I'm the one signing that contract. I'm the CEO of Aurum and Iris. My company operates 3 offices across 3 states, specializing in antique jewelry and estate asset authentication. Everything you're seeing is real." Someone dropped a spoon. Aunt Evelyn's jaw dropped open. My father leaned back, sweat on his forehead. Lily gripped the edge of the table, her voice cracking. You have that kind of money and didn't say anything? Mom and Dad are in debt for me. I'm still in school. I turned to my mom. I've been transferring $7,000, 0 cents to you every month for over 2 years. You never wondered where it came from? Her face went pale. My dad turned bright red. Lily started crying. I have a right to know, she shouted, her voice shaking. I'm your sister. Family is supposed to share. I looked at her. At all of them. The ones who once dismissed me, belittled me, looked down on me, while living off the effort I worked so hard for. I spoke softly but clearly. Family doesn't mean carrying the people who always look down on you. I closed the laptop and walked toward the door. Behind me, someone yelled something about obligations and duties, but I didn't turn back. All I could hear was the steady beat of my heart, like the ticking of an old gold watch, still running smoothly despite dust and time. No one stood to hug me. No one said, Gabriella, we're proud of you. No congratulations, no genuine smile. After a long stretch of silence, the first thing I heard was Mom's voice, sharp like a punch to the chest. You've got millions of dollars and you still let your parents struggle? Did you even think about your sister? I didn't get a chance to answer before Lily screamed, tears running down her cheeks. I deserve to know. I'm your sister. You kept it all a secret and you just sat there, watching us suffer. Suffering? I let out a short laugh. You call flying business class, wearing a Cartier watch, and buying a BMW suffering? My father, who had been silent until now, slammed his hand on the table. That's enough. No matter what you do, you're still a daughter of this family. Families share. You should be ashamed for keeping this a secret. I looked around the table. Their eyes weren't the eyes of loved ones. They looked at me like a safe that had just been cracked open. I've sent $7,000, 0 cents a month to you and Mom for 2 years. Every time you called crying, saying you couldn't manage, I never asked why. I didn't set conditions, I just quietly sent the money. And this is how I'm repaid? Then why didn't you say anything? My mother shot back. Why didn't you tell us you were successful? Was it because you didn't want us to rely on you? Or because you wanted to keep it all to yourself? I tightened my grip on the glass, keeping my voice steady. Because I got used to being ignored. Ever since Lily was born, I stopped being a priority. Every award I won, every exam I aced, it was all forgotten because your sister needs to rest. I looked directly at my mother. Do you remember when I got a perfect SAT score, or when I got a full scholarship? And Dad, do you remember my graduation? No one came. Everyone was too busy watching Lily's preschool ballet recital. Mom's hands were trembling. Her lips moved, but no words came out. And now, the moment you find out I did something none of you ever believed I could do, your first reaction is anger because I didn't share it? That's not it, Lily cut in. I'm just shocked. I feel betrayed. You didn't trust me. I turned to my sister, my voice low. You've never trusted me. You've always seen me as the shadow behind you. You mocked my work in front of your friends. You told them I lived off Mom and Dad. When I'm the one who paid for every semester you studied, every vacation you bragged about online. Lily froze, eyes wide. She didn't expect me to know everything. Gabriella, I'm not trying to fight, but you can't hoard that kind of fortune and expect everyone to act like nothing's changed, my mom said, her voice shaking. The family needs help. You could start a fund. For Lily? She wants to open her own interior design firm. You mean use my money to fund a dream that's never been followed through? I opened my purse, pulled out my phone, tapped a few buttons, and said firmly, I just canceled the automatic transfers. The room exploded. My mom screamed. Gabriella, you can't do that. Your father and I were counting on that. Lily hasn't even finished her degree. Then it's time to start figuring it out. I've been on my own since I was 17. If I could do it, so can the rest of you. I stood up. The chair hit the floor with a solid thud. No one stopped me. But I still turned back, one last time. If the only reason anyone wants to keep me in their life is money, then, I'm sorry, but I'm done buying love. And I don't need it anymore. I walked out as whispers erupted behind me. Someone mentioned a lawyer. Someone else said, she'll regret this. But when I closed that heavy wooden door behind me, the only thing I felt was relief. I left Thanksgiving dinner, no one saw me out. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty for choosing myself. That night, back in my apartment, my phone started buzzing nonstop, like someone was holding down the call button. Texts flooded the screen. The first few were from my mother. Gabriella, you're making everything worse. We need to talk. Lily's falling apart. Can't you see she's lost all faith? Family is where you come back to, not what you walk away from. Then my dad, colder and more measured. I don't know what kind of person you've become, but this is not how you treat family. Message number 37 came from Lily. You're ruining everything. You'll regret this. I powered off the phone and placed it face down on the table, like doing that could somehow make the storm go away. But the next day, company email started receiving spam, mostly from names that were all too familiar. Uncles, distant relatives, even the wife of my dad's friend who used to say, Gabrielle is sweet even if she's not exactly brilliant. I hired an attorney. His name was Marcus. He had represented some of my VIP clients in estate disputes. When I handed him the thread of messages, his face didn't change. He simply nodded. You need a clean break. Financially and legally. I'll draft the cease and desist letters today. We sent official notices to everyone on the list, demanding they stop all forms of harassment, threats, or financial requests. I asked Marcus to include one short line, not in legalese, but in plain human language. Love, if it exists, should never come with an invoice. A week later, Lily posted a long, cryptic message on social media. It started with, "Not everyone with money has a heart." Alongside the caption were old photos. Me holding her as a baby, me at her high school graduation, me smiling at her 17th birthday dinner. The whole post read like an emotional indictment designed to win sympathy. The comments split into two camps. One side called me a cold-hearted ATM. The other wondered why someone getting an MBA was using 8-year-old pictures to play the victim. I didn't respond. I simply opened an old wooden box in my closet and took out the vintage necklace Grandma Marie gave me when I was 15, a single pearl hanging quietly on faded gold. I fastened it around my neck, like putting on the piece of memory that had made me strong all these years. Grandma was the only family member I hadn't blocked. When I called and told her everything, she wasn't surprised. She just sighed. You finally did what you should have done a long time ago. I stayed silent. She continued, her voice slow but firm. Gabriella, family isn't the people who pull you back when you're trying to fly. You've lived in their shadow long enough. It's time you choose your own light. The following week, I invited her to stay with me for a few days. She arrived with a small suitcase and a tin of butter cookies she'd baked herself. We sat in the living room, going through a gem collection I'd just acquired from Switzerland. And she, the one who had taught me how to tell real from fake with instinct, smiled like her whole life had been waiting for that moment. I changed all my phone numbers. Every personal address was scrubbed from the company system. My receptionist was instructed not to admit anyone claiming to be family without an appointment. I signed a lease for a new headquarters in a secured complex, complete with security guards and biometric entry. One Monday morning, as I sipped coffee and reviewed an exhibit layout, Marcus called. Looks like things have gone quiet, at least on paper. I just smiled, because I knew that silence wasn't acceptance, it was reluctance. But that didn't matter anymore. I didn't need them to acknowledge who I was. I just needed to stop asking for permission to be myself. My grandmother once told me, A true gem doesn't need to shout to prove its worth. It only needs to not be buried among the rocks. Now I'd been placed in the right setting, and I would never let anyone drag me back into the shadows again. I moved into my new home in early March, a modest mid-century style villa on the outskirts of Madison, Wisconsin, overlooking Lake Mendota. Nothing flashy, but quiet and private. It had a perimeter security fence, AI-integrated surveillance cameras, and a jewelry vault designed like a bank-grade safe room. I set up everything in my new office by hand. A warm amber desk lamp, a soft leather chair, and a vintage mahogany bookshelf I bought from a closing bookstore. The smell reminded me of childhood afternoons reading Nancy Drew in Grandma's attic. For the first time in my life, I was living in a space where I didn't have to shrink myself. Didn't have to dim my own success to make others feel comfortable. No more half sneers or half pitying glances from Mom. No more snide remarks from Lily like, "That necklace looks like it's from Target." No more Sunday dinners where I had to pretend to be normal. I was fully myself, and that was enough to fill every empty space. To my surprise, the company grew even stronger after everything. A few former clients reached out after seeing Lily's cryptic social media post. They didn't ask questions. In fact, some trusted me more because I had kept everything private for so many years. A renowned fashion designer contacted me to authenticate a personal vintage jewelry collection for an upcoming exhibition in New York. A major European museum invited me to collaborate on a project to restore a lost 18th century treasure. I hired 2 new appraisal specialists, expanded our Denver office, and signed partnership contracts with 3 international auction houses. In a strategic meeting, my CFO hesitated before saying, "We're in a position to acquire a smaller competitor in the South. If you're ready, Gabriella, this could be the time to expand our influence." I smiled. I had never chased power. What I'd sought from the very beginning was freedom. One early morning, I sat by the second-story window, a cup of black tea in hand, watching the mist roll across the lake. Grandma was outside, watering the plants, still wearing her favorite sky blue cardigan. She had stayed with me longer than planned, and I hadn't stopped her. "Do you know what I'm most proud of?" she asked me one evening as we sat in my office sorting gemstones. I shook my head. She didn't say career or wealth. She just said that you stayed true to your values, even when the price was high. That line stayed with me for days. I thought about all the times I stayed silent to avoid hurting others, the nights I came home with heavy shoulders, thinking I had to be enough to be noticed. The years I pushed myself to be useful, just to be seen. Now, I didn't need validation from anyone, because I had already proven to the one person who mattered most, myself, that I was enough. One day, while checking inventory for restoration, I came across the pale lavender stone swan hairpin Grandma once kept in that old box. I had held on to it for years, not for its monetary value, but because it marked the beginning of everything. I wrapped it in a blue velvet box and wrote one short note on the card. "For the girl who once felt invisible, you became the kind of light no one saw coming." I placed that box on the first shelf in my private gallery as a reminder that my journey didn't begin with privilege. It began with being forgotten. Not long after, I received an invitation to speak at an international conference on heritage and appraisal in Paris. For the first time, I didn't hesitate. I no longer feared what people might think, or worried that taking the stage might make someone in my family feel small. I was going, under my real name, with the company I'd built from the ground up, wearing the white gold ring Grandma had given me, and with the quiet pride of someone who had once been overlooked, but never forgot who she was. Gabriella's story is a powerful reminder that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is step away from your own family to find truth and freedom. Not everyone is born into the love they deserve, but everyone has the right to choose not to live forever in the shadow of injustice. Gabriella didn't just build a career from nothing. She learned how to love herself without needing approval from those who once hurt her. That's true healing. That's real freedom. What do you think about Gabriella's choice? Was she too harsh, or was it the only way for her to live true to her worth? Let us know your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful, emotional family stories. I stepped into the banquet hall, bathed in dazzling lights, where everything exuded such opulence that it bordered on ostentation. The crystal chandeliers reflected golden light onto the soft silk tablecloths, while the elegantly dressed guests raised their champagne glasses with pride. This was not a place I ever thought I would set foot in, not a place for someone who had been cast aside by her own family. But here I was, at the lavish wedding of Sophia, my younger sister. The very person who, 12 years ago, had watched me walk out of our home with cold, unfeeling eyes, without a hint of hesitation. I was not on the guest list. Of course not. Someone who had been erased from the family at 18 had no reason to show up at this perfectly curated event. But fate has a way of playing cruel jokes, and tonight was the moment I had been waiting for over a decade. Walking among the powerful and privileged, I could feel the stares burning into me, the whispers rippling through the air like waves. Naturally, I was no longer that quiet, invisible girl who silently endured their contempt. At that moment, a voice laced with disdain cut through the elegant atmosphere. "What is this, Catherine?" I turned my head and met the sharp gaze of my mother, Margaret, a woman who had never once shown me affection. She smirked, lifting her glass of champagne with a smug expression. "What is that useless girl doing here?" I kept my smile intact. It had been a long time since I had last heard her speak about me, and yet her voice still carried the same dismissive disgust, as if I were an unwanted stain on her perfect life. Sophia stood beside my mother, arms crossed, lips curling into a mocking smirk. Her extravagant wedding gown made her look like the perfect princess in everyone's eyes, but I knew the truth about Sophia. "You're not on the guest list," she said haughtily, loud enough for those nearby to stop and turn toward us. But before anyone could react, another voice rang out, this time filled with shock and a trace of fear. "Wait, she's..." The one who spoke was Daniel, Sophia's fiancé. His face suddenly turned pale, his eyes widening as he looked at me like he had just seen a ghost from the past. I raised an eyebrow, stepping toward him slowly, my heels clicking against the polished marble floor. "Do you really not know anything, Daniel?" My voice was soft, but the weight of my words was undeniable. The room fell into a sudden, heavy silence. Sophia furrowed her brows, glancing at her fiancé, as if sensing something was terribly wrong. I did not rush. I simply stood there, letting the silence stretch, allowing their gazes to remain fixated on me, waiting for everything to begin unraveling. Just as the flawless wedding Sophia had meticulously crafted was about to shatter. Daniel took a step back, his complexion visibly paling. I remained still, quietly observing the reactions of my family, the very people who had once turned their backs on me without hesitation. A part of me wanted to savor this moment longer, but I wasn't in a hurry. Because before they could fully comprehend what was happening, I wanted them to remember the night that had changed my life forever. 12 years ago, I stood at my front door, the biting cold of a New York winter night cutting through me like a blade. Snowflakes drifted silently, covering the streets in a pristine white layer that starkly contrasted with the darkness weighing down my heart. My old, battered suitcase rested at my feet, holding only a few pieces of clothing and the small belongings I had managed to grab. The door slammed shut behind me without hesitation. I remembered my mother's final words, not spoken in anger nor sorrow, but with chilling indifference. "You are worthless to this family. I've put up with you long enough." And my father? He said very little. He simply stood there, arms crossed, allowing my mother to make the decision, just like always. And Sophia, just 17 at the time, stood with her arms folded, smirking like she had just won a battle she had been waging for years. No tears, no last-minute pleas, only the freezing wind hitting my face as I stepped away from that door. A door I knew I would never be allowed to walk through again. I wandered the streets with no idea where to go, no money, no close friends I could turn to, and no one from my family called to check if I was even still alive. I curled up in the corner of an alley next to a small diner in Brooklyn, where the warmth from the kitchen vents kept me from freezing. The first night, I prayed for morning to come quickly. By the second night, I began to understand that if I didn't do something, I wouldn't survive this winter. The next morning, just as I was about to leave in search of a better place to stay, the diner's back door swung open. A middle-aged woman with graying hair tied into a tight bun stepped out. Rita, the owner of the diner. She looked at me with narrowed, calculating eyes. "If you're planning on staying here all night, at least make yourself useful." I looked up, surprised. She didn't ask why I was there. She didn't show pity. She simply tossed me a rag. "Get in the kitchen and clean up. You can eat when you're done." I didn't hesitate. I had no right to refuse. From that day on, I did every job in the diner: cleaning, serving, washing dishes, whatever Rita asked of me. I slept in a small storage room behind the kitchen, surrounded by sacks of flour and boxes of supplies. It wasn't comfortable, but at least it had a roof, an old mattress, and, most importantly, it held a sliver of hope. Every night I studied by the dim light in the storage room. I refused to let my life revolve around this kitchen forever. I wanted more. I applied for a scholarship to a business school. I knew the chances were slim, but I had nothing to lose. A few months later, when I received my acceptance letter, I collapsed onto the diner's kitchen floor and cried. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was on the right path. The college years passed in a blur of early morning classes, late-night shifts, and countless sleepless nights spent studying. But by the time I graduated, I knew everything had changed. I was no longer the abandoned girl wandering the winter streets. I had become someone they could never have imagined. At 27, I founded my own nutrition company, Catherine Health, a brand specializing in clean supplements and functional foods. I understood the struggles of those who had once been hungry, who had counted every cent just to afford a meal. And that understanding was what fueled my company's success. Within just 5 years, Catherine Health expanded across dozens of states in the U.S. My products filled the shelves of major retailers, were recommended by doctors, and even appeared in business magazines. And yet, in all those years, not a single person from my family reached out. No messages, no calls, not even a fleeting inquiry about whether I was alive. I had become a stranger to them, and that was perfectly fine. Or at least, I thought so. Back at Sophia's wedding, I looked at Daniel, her fiancé, and let a slow smile spread across my face. "You know who I am, don't you?" I asked, my voice light as air. Daniel didn't answer, but I saw it in his eyes, the hesitation, the fear. He knew, and that meant I had not been forgotten. The only problem was, they were never prepared to see me again. Daniel still hadn't spoken, but his face said it all. The entire ballroom was now focused on me, their eyes filled with curiosity and unease. I could sense Sophia's pulse quicken as she glanced at her fiancé, then back at me, her lips pressing into a tight line. I remained composed. In a deep blue evening gown that hugged my frame perfectly, my hair swept up in an elegant bun, I was nothing like the girl they had cast aside years ago. I could see them struggling to process it, trying to understand how Catherine, the worthless daughter they abandoned, could stand before them with such poise and authority. "Daniel," I spoke slowly, locking eyes with him. "You know who I am, don't you?" Daniel swallowed hard, his grip tightening around his wineglass until his knuckles turned white. He barely had time to react before Sophia stepped forward, inserting herself between us, her voice sharp and cold. "Why are you here?" she hissed, trying to regain control. "Are you here to beg for forgiveness? Or to steal attention on my big day?" I smiled, a sharp, deliberate smile. "Forgiveness?" I tilted my head. "I think you're mistaken, Sophia." I met her arrogant gaze, letting her see exactly what she had failed to notice all these years. I was no longer the abandoned child they had discarded. There was nothing to beg for. I had come to show them the truth they had worked so hard to bury. Catherine? A steady voice called my name from behind. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Ethan, my husband, stepped beside me, placing a firm yet gentle hand on my back, a silent declaration. No theatrics, no unnecessary words. Just his presence alone was enough for everyone to sense the power and success I carried with me now. Ethan was a highly accomplished businessman, the man I had built my life with over the years. But more than that, he was the only person who had witnessed every effort, every pain, and every moment of growth that had led me to this point. And now he stood beside me, a quiet statement that I was no longer someone to be dismissed. Sophia rolled her eyes and scoffed. Oh, so you found someone stupid enough to believe in you? How pathetic. She lifted her chin, her mocking gaze sweeping over Ethan. But I saw the flicker of unease in her eyes. You think just because you married some rich guy, you're suddenly on my level. I blinked slowly, keeping my voice composed. On your level, Sophia? I let out a quiet chuckle. If I remember correctly, you're the one who built a perfect little lie to deceive everyone here, aren't you? I saw her expression darken. What are you talking about? I calmly reached into my clutch, pulling out a neatly folded document. I held it up, steady and deliberate. This is your academic record from medical school, I said, my tone as light as ever, but each word struck her like a knife. Or rather, the proof that you were expelled in your second year. A heavy silence fell over the ballroom. Sophia froze. For a split second, pure panic flashed across her face before she quickly masked it. You're lying. Am I? I shrugged, turning to Daniel. If you don't believe me, feel free to check for yourself. Surely you wouldn't want to marry someone who doesn't even have a legitimate degree, right? Daniel stiffened. It was clear this was the first time he was hearing any of this. Sophia? His voice was hoarse, filled with doubt. Tell me she's lying. Sophia whipped around, snapping at him. Of course she is. Don't listen to her. But it was too late. The sheer panic in her eyes had already exposed the truth. And I wasn't finished yet. Not only did you lie about graduating, I continued, my voice eerily calm, but you also deceived the medical system, your patients, and even your own fiancé. Daniel's brow furrowed. What do you mean? I slowly placed another document on the table. Your medical license, Sophia, or should I say, your fake medical license. This time, the murmurs in the crowd erupted into full-blown whispers. I could see Dr. Matthews, a renowned physician and someone my family once boasted about knowing, standing at a distance, his face a mask of shock. Daniel slowly picked up the paper, skimmed through it, then abruptly looked at Sophia with disappointment. You forged documents to pretend to be a doctor? Sophia opened her mouth, but no words came out, because she knew. She had lost. And I knew this show was just beginning. Daniel stared at the paper in his hands, the trust he once had for Sophia now replaced with doubt and disillusionment. The entire ballroom was drowning in heavy silence, broken only by the growing whispers of the guests. They were beginning to realize that the grand wedding they were attending was not a fairy tale, but a disaster about to explode before their eyes. Sophia tried to regain her composure, but I could see her hands trembling. You think a meaningless piece of paper like this can ruin me? Her voice was defiant, but the tension in her eyes betrayed her. Daniel, don't believe her. She's just trying to stir up drama. Daniel slowly shook his head. But you never told me about this, Sophia. If it's all a lie, why do you look so nervous? Sophia opened her mouth to argue, but I didn't give her the chance. I slowly reached into my clutch and pulled out a small USB, holding it up for everyone in the ballroom to see. Sophia, did you really think all I had was a single document? I smiled, but there was no warmth in my eyes. No, I came prepared for much more than that. The entire room fell silent. I could see Margaret, my mother, clutching her champagne glass so tightly that her fingers turned pale. Richard, my father, sat motionless at the table, his jaw clenched, a clear sign that he knew what was coming. I turned to Daniel. Do you have a laptop here? Daniel looked up, blinking a few times as if trying to process everything happening around him. Finally, he nodded. Yes, over at the sound booth. I turned on my heel, walking slowly toward the DJ's station where a laptop rested on the control panel. I didn't need to say a word. Daniel followed me, as if some part of him already knew that something far worse was coming. Sophia panicked. Daniel stopped, but it was too late. Daniel took the USB from my hand and plugged it into the laptop. The large projector screen behind the stage lit up. Files began appearing one by one. I pressed a key and document after document opened. Financial records, bank statements, undeniable proof of money being funneled into untraceable accounts. And then the insurance records from Morelli Family Care Clinic, the very clinic my family had been running for over a decade. I turned back to my father. Dad, did you really think no one would uncover your fraudulent medical claims? The entire room turned to look at Richard. He gripped the armrests of his chair, his face pale as a sheet. You don't know what you're talking about, Catherine. His voice was unsteady, but I wasn't going to let him manipulate his way out of this. I pressed another key and the screen displayed a financial report. Clear evidence that my father had been using my identity to evade taxes for over a decade. The ballroom erupted in gasps. Some guests shook their heads in disbelief, others exchanged wary glances. I looked at my father, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. You used my social security number to file fake income reports, create fraudulent tax deductions, and launder money through your clinic, I said, pausing for a moment before tilting my head. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? Margaret shot up from her seat. You're lying. No one will believe you. I didn't even look at her. Instead, I turned back to Daniel. This isn't just some minor financial scandal, I said. If you look closely, you'll see that Sophia's involved too. She stole another intern's identity to issue prescriptions and collect insurance payouts. Daniel didn't say a word. He turned to Sophia, his face filled with pain. You lied to me about all of this? His voice was hoarse. Sophia frantically shook her head. No, it's all lies. I let out a quiet chuckle. If you're so sure, then why don't you explain what's on that screen? Sophia trembled. Daniel looked at her for a long moment, then slowly reached for his ring finger. I was ready to spend my entire life protecting you, he said bitterly. But it turns out the woman I was about to marry is nothing but a fraud. He pulled off his wedding ring and threw it to the floor. The sharp sound of metal hitting marble echoed through the silent ballroom. Sophia gasped, stumbling backward as if she was about to collapse. But no one cared anymore. The crowd had already begun murmuring, some guests discreetly leaving their tables while others exchanged knowing glances. I took a step back, watching as everything Sophia had built crumbled right in front of her. Sophia stood frozen in the middle of the ballroom. Her engagement ring lay abandoned at her feet, reflecting the golden light of the chandelier above. But no one picked it up. Tears welled in her eyes, but no one cared anymore. Daniel had left. The perfect wedding she had spent years crafting had collapsed in a single night. The room was in chaos. Some guests rushed to leave while others stood transfixed, their faces filled with a mix of curiosity and fear. Whispers of the Morelli family's involvement in financial fraud and medical malpractice spread like wildfire. Margaret, my mother, desperately tried to keep her composure, but I could see her hands shaking as she clutched her expensive handbag, as if holding onto it tightly would somehow restore her world to what it once was. Don't listen to her, Margaret suddenly shrieked, her voice losing all control. She's always been jealous, always trying to destroy this family. I smiled, stepping closer to her, my voice soft but sharp. Is that so? Then why don't we call the IRS? Or maybe the hospital where Sophia supposedly works. I'm sure they'd love to hear about this. The truth was, they already knew. Just as I finished speaking, a loud ringing cut through the air. Richard, my father, hurriedly pulled his phone from his suit pocket. His face had already been tense, but as soon as he glanced at the screen, his expression completely drained of color. Morelli Family Care Clinic was calling. He rejected the call, But only seconds later, another voice spoke up from the crowd. Dr. Collins, a well-known physician from the hospital, took a step forward. His voice was grave. "Richard, the hospital is requesting your immediate presence." Dr. Collins' voice was firm as he looked at my father, his eyes filled with suspicion. "They've just uncovered multiple forged prescriptions under Sophia's name. All of them are tied to your clinic." A new wave of murmurs rippled through the crowd. Sophia immediately shook her head in panic. "No, I didn't do anything. Someone must have forged my name," she screamed, her voice trembling. But no one believed her anymore. And then, right at that moment, the doors to the ballroom swung open. 2 police officers stepped inside. The entire room fell silent, holding its breath. I wasn't the one who called them, but I knew that once the truth was exposed, someone would act before I even had to. One of the officers stepped forward, his voice calm yet commanding. "Richard Morelli, you need to come with us for questioning regarding allegations of financial fraud and insurance malpractice." I glanced at my father. For the first time in my life, I saw true fear in his eyes. "This is a mistake," he tried to argue, but no one believed him anymore. Sophia burst into tears, rushing to grab his arm. "Dad, do something. They can't take us away like this." "Dad?" I repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Sophia, did you really think he was the only one involved in this?" One of the officers turned to Sophia, then spoke. "Miss Morelli, we will also need you to come in for questioning regarding the falsification of medical credentials." Sophia completely broke down. "No, I didn't do anything," she screamed, tears streaming down her perfectly made-up face. But no one came to help her. Margaret turned to her daughter, then to her husband, as if desperately searching for someone to salvage the situation. But then, she realized it was over. Some guests quietly slipped out. Others pulled out their phones, recording the spectacle as it unfolded. The Morelli family's reputation, the legacy my mother had spent her life protecting, was crumbling before her very eyes. She turned back to me, her eyes filled with hatred. "You destroyed this family." I let out a soft chuckle, my expression unshaken. "No, Mother," I said evenly. "You all destroyed yourselves a long time ago. I just made sure the world saw the truth." Richard lowered his head, saying nothing as the officers secured handcuffs around his wrists. Sophia continued sobbing, begging in vain. But no one cared anymore. And me? I just stood there, watching everything fall apart. Calm, proud, and with absolutely no regrets. Richard was escorted out of the ballroom in silence. The crowd parted to let the officers pass, but no one spoke up to defend him. His entire life he had been the one in control, the one making all the decisions. But in this moment, all the power he once held had vanished in a single night. Sophia knelt on the floor, her trembling hands clutching at her expensive wedding gown, now stained by the ruins of her own downfall. Once a perfect princess, she was now nothing more than a broken woman, exposed in front of everyone. She had no fiancé, no dignity, and most importantly, no one left to believe in her. Margaret, my mother, stood frozen. I could see it in her eyes. She wanted to do something, to say something that could turn the situation around. But for the first time in her life, she realized that she no longer had control over anything. I took a step forward, facing the man who once declared that I was unworthy of being part of this family. Richard lifted his head to look at me, his expression filled with resentment. "You think you've won?" His voice was hoarse, thick with anger. "You're nothing but a traitor. I never considered you my daughter." The entire ballroom fell silent. Everyone was waiting for my reaction. But I simply stood there, calm and composed, as if I had been waiting for this moment my entire life. I leaned down slightly, looking him straight in the eye. "Your family was lost a long time ago. You just never realized it." Not a hint of rage, not a trace of sorrow. I spoke the words as if they were nothing more than facts, and the truth was, they were. Richard opened his mouth to argue, but then he saw it. There was no one left on his side. He had destroyed everything with his own hands. Margaret clutched her designer handbag tightly, her face pale. She glanced around, as if searching for someone still loyal to the Morelli family, but everyone had turned their backs on them. The guests who once praised them, the colleagues who once respected them, now only wary stares and hushed whispers remained. Sophia let out a quiet sob. "Catherine, you can't do this to me." I turned to look at her. For the first time tonight, her voice was no longer sharp, no longer filled with mockery. Instead, it was drenched in desperation. "You did this to yourself, Sophia," I said softly but firmly. She collapsed further, unable to argue. I took a deep breath, feeling the crisp night air fill my lungs. I had done what I came here to do. A warm hand rested on my back. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Ethan, the man who had always stood by me, the one person whose loyalty I had never doubted. "Let's go, Catherine," he said gently, but I could hear the pride in his voice. I gave a slight nod. There was nothing left here for me. We walked out of the ballroom, passing curious stares and hushed murmurs, but no one dared to stop me. I was no longer the weak girl they had so easily cast aside. Outside, the cool evening air wrapped around me like a soft embrace. I exhaled slowly, feeling as if I had just set down a weight I had carried for over a decade. Ethan opened the car door for me, but before stepping in, I realized there was one more thing I wanted to do before this night ended. I turned to him, my eyes gleaming with a spontaneous idea. "Ethan, do you want to get some cake?" He blinked, momentarily surprised by my question, but then a smile quickly spread across his face. "Cake?" He chuckled. "Absolutely. We have something to celebrate, after all." I laughed, feeling a lightness spread through me, not because I had sought revenge, but because I had truly freed myself. We drove to a small bakery on the corner of the street, its warm golden light spilling through the windows. I ordered a slice of red velvet cake, while Ethan got a piece of cheesecake. I picked up my fork, cutting into the cake and taking a bite. The sweetness melted on my tongue instantly, but the best part was knowing that I could finally enjoy it, without any burden weighing on me. Ethan watched me, his gaze filled with warmth. "How do you feel now?" he asked. I took a sip of my tea, letting its slight bitterness linger for a moment. Then I set my cup down and smiled. Free. That was my real victory. Not the downfall of the Morelli family, not the exposure of their secrets, but the fact that, at last, I was no longer bound by my past. Catherine's story is not just about reclaiming justice. It's a powerful lesson on freedom and self-worth. Sometimes the people we love most are the ones who turn their backs on us first. But what truly matters is not how we are abandoned, but how we rise again. Catherine never sought revenge. She only demanded fairness and proved that a person's worth is not defined by those who discard them, but by how they rebuild their own life. And that is the true victory. What do you think of Catherine's story? If you were in her situation, how would you have faced it? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to follow the channel for more inspiring stories about life and family.